Good evening. My name is Michael Bass, and I am the chair of the steering committee of JCRC's Esther Raab Holocaust Museum and Goodwin Education Center. Thank you for joining us this evening. On November 1st, 2005, the United Nations General Assembly passed Resolution 60/7, designating January 27th each year as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. This date was chosen as it is the anniversary of the liberation of the largest and most infamous World War II death camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau, located in southern Poland. 2024 marks the 79th anniversary of that liberation. The UN has urged every one of its members to honor the, quote, 6 million Jewish victims, 1/3 of the Jewish people, along with countless members of other minorities who died at the hands of the Nazis, unquote. The resolution also asks its members to promote the development of educational programs to combat anti-Semitism and hate wherever they occur. The resolution also rejected any form of Holocaust denial and encouraged member states to preserve sites that the Nazis used in carrying out their final solution. This includes the preservation of killing centers, concentration camps, ghettos, mass burial sites, and prisons. In the last month, our community has lost 3 Holocaust survivors: Charles Middleberg, Izzy Randell, and Elizabeth Roth, reminding us how important it is for all of us to continue to not just remember, but to learn and educate others of the need to stand up against hatred and anti-Semitism in all its forms. Just last week, I finished reading an eye-opening book by Michael Hirsch titled Liberators, America's Witness to the Holocaust, in which several U.S. World War II veterans who were concentration camp liberators were interviewed about their wartime experiences. Brigadier General Russell Weiskircher's division was one of the liberators of Dachau on April 29, 1945, after they happened upon the camp in a suburb of Munich during their trips across Europe. Hirsch interviewed Mr. Weiskircher for this book. Listen carefully to one of his replies. Quote, Dachau was the building block for the rest of my life. I decided that bad things happen when good people shut up and don't do anything. So I started out on a crusade of one to let the world know you got to get off the dime and do something. You ought to wake up, you got to get up, you got to stand up, and you got to speak up, and don't you dare shut up. That's been my creed for years and years and years, unquote. Weiskircher became a Southern preacher after the war and spread this message continually to his constituents. He passed away in 2015 at the age of 90, but his words remain a lesson for all of us. This evening, we are happy to have with us Dr. Fred Katz. Dr. Katz is a retired radiologist and associate professor of radiology at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. During the Vietnam War, he served as a physician, receiving a Bronze Star and Army Commendation for his service. His experiences in Vietnam inspired him to pursue a path of communal and professional service, leading to the creation of his book, My Road to Remembrance. He's a passionate photographer and became dedicated to preserving the legacies of Holocaust victims and advancing Judaica studies. Through his travels, he has photographed over 100 Holocaust memorials worldwide. His photographs have been exhibited at various notable locations, such as the Bremen Jewish Heritage Museum in Atlanta, the Atlanta Jewish Community Center, as well as in several synagogues. His book is a photographic journey of his travels. At the conclusion of Dr. Katz's presentation, there will be time for some questions. Please place them in the Q&A, and we will address as many as time permits. Welcome, Dr. Katz, to our 24th commemoration, and we look forward to hearing about your travels and viewing your photos.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good evening to you all, and thank you for attending this virtual presentation. It is an honor for me to speak to you tonight in commemoration of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day this past weekend. During the next 45 minutes, I would like to take you on a journey that I have been on for almost 50 years, which culminated in the publication of my book, My Road to Remembrance, this past year. My road to remembrance began in 1975 when my late wife, Doris, and myself decided to take a trip to Germany. Doris's parents' family had lived in Fulda in Bavaria for 3 generations, and they had told us that they had very good relations with their Gentile neighbors. And her father had encouraged us to make this trip back to Germany as he was unable and had never been back since he had left. So it was days before the internet. It was difficult to find good travel information. We happened to make a visit to New York and we're in Manhattan, and I decided to go up to the German consulate and get some information. And while we were looking around up there, I met a wonderful woman who offered to help us. She asked us if she would like to draw us a map of the areas that we wanted to see, and we said yes. And she started to draw a map through southern Bavaria. And
Dr. Katz,
yes,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. The participants are asking if you could get a little bit closer to your computer. Some of them are having difficulty hearing you.
okay.
Thank you.
Yes, and so is that better? Maybe, I don't know. Can you hear me?
Let's give it a try.
Okay. So as she was drawing the map, she got to Augsburg, which was our last stop before Munich. And she drew a route from Augsburg to Munich. And as she got to Dachau, she looked up at us and said, and of course, you will want to go to Dachau. At that time, for the first time, I noticed a little Jewish star around her neck. And I said, of course. And she continued the route. We thanked her, we left. And my wife and I decided after leaving that we, in fact, did not want to go to a concentration camp on this particular trip, as it would be probably too depressing. So a few months later, in the fall of 1975, we found ourselves on a trip to southern Germany, visiting a lot of the famous places and the hometown of her parents. A lot of very emotional things happened to us during that trip. I'll just recount one. We visited some old friends of her parents who were still living there, and they told us that every Sunday they would spend time with her parents and her grandparents as they would come from church. So on Sunday, they would walk down from the church, passing by their grandparents' home and her grandparents' home. And a lot of times, if the weather was nice, her grandparents would be sitting in the garden having a drink. They would invite them in for a schnapps. They would sit around, have a schnapps with the family, and then they would all go in to have lunch. And he said to us that one day in January or February, they came down from church. It was a warmish February day, and they decided to stop for a schnapps as usual. They had the schnapps, said goodbye to the grandparents and her parents, and they all went in for lunch, and they never saw her parents again or grandparents. Because what had happened was, we found out later that her grandparents and parents knew that during lunchtime on Sunday, the town became very quiet. So even though they had a lot of friends in the town, and they said there weren't many Nazis in that particular town, it was Fulda, and it was a very Catholic and religious town, we were told. They didn't know who they could trust. So when everybody went in for lunch, it was very quiet. They got into their automobiles and drove from Fulda to Hamburg, and Hamburg they boarded a ship to America. So they were able to do this because in 1934, they had already planned to leave Germany. Then they started to look for places all around the world. They actually even went to Palestine at the time, but thought Palestine would be too difficult. So eventually they were able to get visas to come to the United States. And after Kristallnacht made the decision to leave Germany. So that fall, like I said, we found ourselves driving down that road from Augsburg to Munich. We had decided, of course, that we were going to go right to Munich. It was about 7:30 in the morning. I remember it was a very foggy day. It was difficult to see the road very well. And through the fog, I saw a sign on the road that said Asfag, Dachau, exit Dachau. And I was just drawn immediately to that exit, I guess remembering what that woman had told us at the consulate. And so we drove out the exit, and I realized immediately that, of course, Dachau was not just a concentration camp, but it was a town. But as luck would have it, the camp was only about 2 miles down the road. We drove to the Dachau concentration camp and entered that camp by ourselves. It was very early in the morning. Nobody else was there. And we didn't even realize that the camp had actually not even opened at that time yet for tourists. Dachau was originally built in 1933. It was built originally to hold political prisoners, but soon morphed into a concentration camp and actually became the prototype for all future concentration camps. Now, this gate here that says Arbeit macht frei, which is the very famous sign that says work makes freedom, which we know was not true, because for most prisoners, the only way that they became free was unfortunately by dying. So through these gates passed 200,000 prisoners from 30 different countries, and approximately 32,000 people, documented people, died and were murdered, I should say, in this particular camp, and many, many more undocumented deaths as well. This is a view down the perimeter of the camp, and you can see most of the barracks were destroyed shortly after the war. One was reconstructed in the distance. Over there, you can see it is now a nice little museum and library. This is the central corridor of the camp. You can see the library and the museum in the distance. And in front of that is the International Monument. This monument was built dedicated in 1968 by a Yugoslavian survivor by the name of Nandor Glid, who built this very poignant and dramatic monument to prisoners who are, you could see the fence posts and the emaciated prisoners actually on the fence itself. Very, very dramatic monument. Most of the actual structures at the camp were destroyed, but this is a reconstructed gas chamber, as you can tell by the smokestack. On the side here of that building is the entrance to the changing rooms. The trucks would pull up here. Prisoners were told to get out, enter the changing room, where they would leave their clothes, and they were told they would go into the shower room, the Brausbad, you can see over there, the door to that. And of course, as we know now, this in fact was not a shower room, but was in fact a gas chamber. Interestingly, the gas chamber at Dachau was never used for mass executions. It was used for experimental purposes and a few small executions, but it was mostly a prototype for other gas chambers. These are the actual ovens that were recovered from the camp and placed in the reconstructed crematorium. There are 3 religious monuments that were built at the camp, a Catholic one, a Protestant one, and a Jewish one. The Catholic memorial was built in 1962. It was designed by a then assistant archbishop of Munich by the name of Johannes Neushandler. He himself was a prisoner in Dachau during the time of the Nazis. And he built this beautiful chapel in the central corridor. We can see here looking out from the inside of the chapel, the International Monument way in the distance and the barracks. It's a very interesting place. We have to remember, of course, we emphasize the Jewish aspect of the Holocaust, but others suffered as well, including Romani, homosexuals, Catholics as well. And in this particular camp, 450 Catholic priests were imprisoned during the war at various times. Very few were executed, but they were imprisoned at this particular camp. Now, the Jewish memorial and the Protestant memorials were built 5 years later. The Jewish memorial I'll show you here, it was built by a Jewish architect by the name of Goodwin. He himself had escaped Germany to Russia during the war and was able to come back after the war and to resume an architectural career. Reading about it, he was not very successful in his career, but he did design various monuments throughout Germany, and he designed this very nice Jewish memorial. You can see there's a down slope going into the chamber. The down slope, of course, signifies the loss of the Jewish people, the destruction of the Jewish people. We can see the Jewish star on the front of the chamber, and on top, of course, we can see a menorah. As we get to the lowest portion of that particular chamber, there is an opening in the roof, and the menorah goes through the roof. The marble from this menorah, interestingly, was mined in northeastern Israel, and this represents, of course, the rebirth of the Jewish people. So that was in 1975. A year later, in 1976, my wife and I decided to go to Israel. We joined a trip called Next Year in Jerusalem. It was a very big trip, a very big group that met in Israel during a UJA meeting. We had 400 young people on this particular airplane. We left from JFK to Tel Aviv on a LL 747. And on the way, we stopped in Vienna, Austria. And we didn't stop in Vienna to see the Opera House or eat strudel, but we stopped in Vienna to visit the Mauthausen concentration camp memorial. And as you can see from this map from Google, the Mauthausen Memorial is about a 2-hour ride west of Vienna. But I'll never forget when the plane landed at the Vienna airport. It landed and was placed way distant in the airport in a private area, because in 1976, it was not safe for an El Al plane to approach the terminal. And so we had to be segregated. And around the plane, I remember looking out the window, we saw black uniformed Austrian police protecting the plane. And we boarded buses directly from that airplane on the tarmac, directly from the plane. We drove directly to Mauthausen. We bypassed the terminal and everything because it was not safe for our group to go through that particular terminal. So Mauthausen is located in an idyllic setting. It's in a beautiful countryside on a hill. You can see the green hills. This is from Google Earth's maps. A very beautiful area, but in this camp, it was the most brutal camp in the whole Nazi concentration camp system. Here was the gate we actually walked through. 400 of us walked through this particular gate. As we walked through the gate, we made a right turn, I remember, entered a building, and then we were separated into groups, and our group went down a flight of stairs. We went through this particular door and into this chamber, which we quickly recognized as a gas chamber. And we were kind of pushed in here, shoved and pushed and shoved and pushed until no more people could get in. And then the door slammed shut. And I'll tell you, even to this day, I remember that eerie feeling, how it felt to stand there in that particular place with that particular group of people. It was very, very, very disturbing. There are a few things about this camp that were very, very brutal. This is the stairs of death. These are 186 granite steps that lead down to the quarry, where the Jewish prisoners would quarry granite blocks, and they had to carry them up and down these stairs on their backs. And sometimes they were doing it for no apparent reason. They weren't building anything. It was just kind of a torture system. And the Nazi guards would whip them as they went up and down the stairs. If they fell over, they might be shot on the spot. It was a very brutal place. In Mauthausen, over 90,000 people were murdered here. It was first built in 1938, and it was liberated on May 5th, 1945, 3 days before the end of World War II. Another brutal place was these cliffs. It was called Parachute Jump because in 1943, a group of Dutch prisoners arrived here at the camp. They took them to the edge of the cliff, and 45 of the prisoners were just shoved over the cliff to their deaths in the quarry. And they called these particular prisoners parachutists. And so every once in a while after that, they would take prisoners to the cliffs and essentially throw them off the cliffs. A very, very brutal place. What's interesting about Mauthausen today is that all the countries that had prisoners in this particular camp, and there was about, I think, 22 countries that had prisoners in the camp, have produced memorials at the camp. And the top two are from West Germany. And you can see there's a quote by Bertolt Brecht on that wall as well. And the lower left one is from Yugoslavia. And if you look at the granite block with the drawing on the block, that is very similar to the International Monument at Dachau, because this monument was in fact designed by the same architect, Nandor Glid, and he designed that as the fence. And the two large columns, of course, represent smokestacks from the gas chambers. The one in the lower right is from Czechoslovakia. This was designed by two actual survivors of Mauthausen. They designed this particular monument, and you can see it's a prisoner standing at the open gates of the camp, of course, with his arms raised towards heaven. To me, the most poignant of the memorials is this one here. This was done by the Russians, and it is of an actual Russian general by the name of Dmitry Karbashev. He was caught and imprisoned in 1945 by the Germans, and he was taken out in the middle of that winter, in the middle of a freezing winter, stripped down naked, hosed down until he actually froze into a block of ice. A very, very disturbing statue. This one is the one that was dedicated by the State of Israel, and this happened to have been dedicated just before we arrived there in 1976. Of course, you can see it's a menorah, and on the right are some letters, Hebrew letters that say Zachor, to remember. And I'll never forget, as we left this camp, we all collected around this menorah. There was 400 of us. And we heard a talk by a man by the name of Monique Einziger. He was himself a survivor of the Mauthausen concentration camp. He at that time worked for the JDC, Joint Distribution Committee. He told us that his wife and himself had both survived Mauthausen concentration camp, one of the most brutal camps in the Nazi concentration camp system, as I told you. And after they survived, they decided that they would never have children, because they could never bring children into a world that produced what they had seen. And every time I tell this story, and I've told it a lot, it brings tears to my eyes. And he looked at us and he said, "For the first time, I see you young people here, and I realize I should have had children. It would have been more of a statement than not to have children." So my wife and I left Mauthausen at that time, and we walked out of the camp, and I remember thinking to ourselves that our lives will never be the same. And sure enough, our lives were never the same after that particular visit. I'd like to show you just one more camp, the Madonna Concentration Camp Memorial. I'd like to show you it because of a few things. Number one, it was the only camp that was found completely intact, because the Russians came into that camp so quickly in 1944 and surprised the Nazis that they didn't have a chance to destroy anything. So as you can see here on this Google map, it is located about 3 hours from Warsaw, at the edge of actually Lublin. Majdanek is another name for Lublin, so a very famous Jewish town as well. The entrance to the camp is really impressive, and that's why I'm actually showing you this, because of these two memorials. This memorial was dedicated in 1968, I believe. The camp operated from 1941 to 1944. And you can see this particular monument was designed by a man by the name of Victor Tolkien. He made it to look like bodies in a menorah kind of a structure. And if we look through in the middle of the structure, in the distance, we can see a dome, which is actually a mausoleum. And I'll show you a close-up of that in a second. You can see the guard towers, by the way, on the right, of course. This is what it looks like up close. And what happened was when the Russians came in here, they found a pile of dirt. And in that dirt, there was actually ashes and human bone. And because the Nazis didn't have time to dispose of the materials, they were actually murdering people so quickly during that particular time. At Majdanek, up to 227,000 people were murdered at this particular place. So the Russians came in, they found that mound, they just covered it with tarpaulin, and it stood for a long time. And eventually it was protected and placed underneath this particular dome. And he wrote in Polish on top of that, it says in Polish, "May our fate be a warning to you all." So, and underneath that is actual human ashes. A number of years later, in 2004, I had the opportunity to photograph a young leadership mission to Poland and Israel. And this is a group of young people leaving a memorial service at that particular monument. And you can see by the looks on their faces how emotional that particular visit was. Here, of course, is a crematorium. You can tell always by the chimney. The crematorium. There are like 7 gas chambers at this particular camp, and a large crematorium. You can see multiple ovens within the crematorium. This was a very murderous place, and like I said, almost 227,000 people were murdered in this particular camp. So Treblinka is one of the extermination camps. I just wanted to show you an example of an extermination camp. Auschwitz, of course, is the most famous. The reason I want to show you Treblinka is because what happened to me when I was there. We visited Treblinka. You can see it's not an easy place to get to. It's over an hour drive from Warsaw, northeast. And there is nothing left of the camp. The entire Treblinka camp was destroyed because Treblinka, as a few other camps, was just designed to exterminate Jews, essentially. At this particular camp, 900,000 Jews were exterminated in about a 15-month period. This was a pure death camp. There were 5 of these extermination death camps. We had Sobibor, we had Belzec, and we have Auschwitz. Majdanek is actually a 6th camp, so it is one of the extermination camps. And these camps were designed to destroy and murder the entire Polish Jewish population during Operation Reinhardt. This was an operation in which 1.7 million Jews were murdered in, like I say, in about a 15-month to 2-year period. A very, very terrible place. You can see all the small stones around there. Each stone is supposed to represent the monument of Jewish death. There are 17,000 small stones like this representing the 900,000 Jews that were killed here. By the way, about 2,000 Romani were also murdered here as well. If you look beneath the tree next to the large monument, you can see there is a plaque. Well, I'll get to that in a second. I just wanted to show you Auschwitz here. This is the classic view of Auschwitz, the tracks leading to Birkenau, because Auschwitz was the largest murderous death camp where 1.1 million Jews were murdered at Auschwitz. But Treblinka was second with 900,000. So as I was photographing there, I was by myself. There was nobody else there. And all of a sudden, a bus pulled up, a very small bus. And about dozen people exited the bus, and I saw they walked to various places, and it looked like they were having some kind of a prayer service. So I watched this woman for a long time. She stood at this particular place. As you can see, it says never again in multiple languages. Uh, I shot this picture from very far away. It was with a telephoto lens, so I didn't intrude on her. But after she walked away and walking around, I had the opportunity to walk over to her and ask her if she could tell me what they were doing here. And she told me they were a group of German Christians, and they were going to all the death camps to ask for forgiveness for the German people. And so it really affected me quite profoundly. And like we said at the beginning, we were talking before you got on, that we, sometimes as Jews, we do feel alone, but we do have a lot of friends in this world. Not all Germans were bad. Not all Poles were bad. There were a lot of people who were very good people. There were people who didn't do anything, that they could have done something, maybe they could have helped, but a lot of the Germans and Poles really had no choice. Once they elected the governments in Germany, they had made their bed, so to speak. And the Poles, of course, although they had a strong history of anti-Semitism throughout the centuries, still they were victims of some sort as well. I'd like to show you this is the largest memorial probably in the world. It is the largest memorial in Europe for sure. It's located in central Berlin. It's called the Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe. It occupies a 200,000 square foot plot of land in central Berlin, very close to the Brandenburg Gate. And it is actually very close to the American Embassy as well. You can see here from the Brandenburg Gate, it is an 8-minute walk, so very easy to get to. It is composed of 2,711 concrete blocks. When you go there, I'm sure some of the people on this call have been there. It's a very famous memorial. I've been there a couple times, and it always leaves me kind of wanting, what is this? Why did they do this in this particular place? Why couldn't they have done something maybe more significant? So to me, it looks like coffins of various sizes and shapes. And I think a lot of people, and most people, might say that. But the artist, a man by the name of Peter Eisenman, interestingly enough, he is from your home state here. He's from New Jersey. Peter Eisenman was born in Newark, New Jersey. He practiced in an architectural firm in Manhattan, a very prominent architectural firm, and they won essentially the contest to do this particular memorial. He says, no, it's not coffins at all. It's just what it is. It's these concrete blocks in a very symmetrical pattern laid out in a grid. And it's on a hill. So you're never on a level structure. And he wanted to have the person, as they walk through that, feel unease and feel unbalanced. And I don't know if it works or not. To me, to be honest, it didn't really work as a memorial. But everybody else, all people have different opinions, I'm sure. Interestingly, in the southeast corner of this particular memorial, underground, there is a museum. It's called the Place of Names. And in this particular museum, there is a nice small history of the Holocaust. And there are 3 million names of Jewish names of people that were murdered during the Holocaust. But there is no significance to the 3 million. They're not trying to tell us that it was 3 million, not 6 million. They just picked 3 million and they wrote 3 million names for some reason. So here it is, as if you were standing and walking through this area. Again, it left me a little wanting. Another nice memorial is in Vienna. Oh, by the way, in Berlin, there are many memorials. There are. I think I have 8 memorials in the book, but there are many memorials throughout Germany. And Germany has done a very good job in memorializing the Holocaust. And you have to give the Germans at least some credit for doing that. In Vienna, there's 2 memorials, and somewhat a third as well. But The most famous memorial is the Judenplatz Holocaust Memorial. It's located right in the center of the old Jewish area. It's called the Nameless Library. And you can see here, it is a library. And if you look real close, the books are facing the wrong way. We don't see the spines of the books. The library, Nameless Library, was built in the year 2000, and it commemorates the 65,000 Austrian Jews who were murdered. The artist was an artist by the name of Rachel Whitered. She's British, and she said she did this this way because the Jews are known as the people of the book. And she put the books backwards because we don't know what they are, because when we lost 6 million Jews, God knows how much knowledge we lost, because we know how much knowledge the Jews do bring to this world. And there's a nice inscription at the bottom, which essentially commemorates the 65,000 Jews that were murdered from 1938 to 1945 by the National Socialists. May their names be obliterated forever. So right in the back of the memorial, there is an entrance to the Jewish Museum. And this picture I like because it shows the policeman. And when I started to photograph in Europe in 1975, we used to run into policemen at a lot of the Jewish synagogues and sites. And we always thought, wow, isn't it kind of bad that they still have to have policemen at all these Jewish sites? And now, of course, we know at all our Jewish sites in America, we have the same situation, quite a sad effect. This museum, by the way, if you go to Austria, please go. If you go to Vienna, it's a very nice museum of the Holocaust, but even more interestingly, in the basement of this museum is an archaeological dig of one of the oldest synagogues in Europe. It's called Mizrahi House, and it's a very interesting place to visit. Now, Budapest has many memorials as well. I think I have about 6 or 7 in the book. And the most famous is the Shoes on the Danube Bank Memorial. And this is a nice picture from Google Earth. You can see the Hungarian Parliament. And right down the block from the Parliament in the lower right-hand corner on the Danube River is the memorial of the Shoes on the Danube Bank. And here is a nice photograph looking up at the chain bridge of these shoes. So this memorial was built in 2005. It represents or it commemorates the 3,500 people that were murdered here, 800 of whom were Jews. They were taken to the edge of the Danube River by the fascist Iron Cross. They were told to take off their shoes, and they were shot and thrown into the river, where they'd be washed down the river. So they used these cast iron shoes. There are 60 pair of shoes to commemorate that particular gruesome event. And when you go there, you can see various yahrzeit candles at places, and people leave stones as they would in a cemetery, because, of course, these poor people that were murdered have no burial place. So in Holland, there are a lot of memorials as well. Amsterdam has many memorials. I'll just show you this one because very few people are able to get here. It's about a 2-hour drive from Amsterdam, and it is the National Westerbork Memorial. Westerbork was a camp that was built for refugees initially. In 1939, it was open to accept refugees from Germany and Austria, mostly Jewish, who were escaping the Nazis when they could at that time and didn't have a place to go. So they built this nice camp with nice buildings and facilities to house the people. But in 1942, when the Nazis took over, they made it a transit camp. And as you can see from this particular camp, most of these people went either to Auschwitz or Sobibor. And so these are two of the extermination camps. And so what happened here was every Tuesday in 1942 to 1944, trains would leave Westerbork for these particular places. Over those 2 years, 102,000 Jews were transported from Amsterdam to these particular camps. So one of the transports, of course, went to Bergen-Belsen. And on that particular transport was Margot Frank and Anne Frank and the family. And here, this is a picture I took in Bergen-Belsen of a memorial to Margot and Anne Frank. Of course, this is not their actual tombstone. It doesn't exist. We don't know where their grave is, where their burying place was. But they died, of course, in 1945, probably of typhus. This is a nice little memorial to their memory. So there are two memorials at the camp that are very famous memorials. This is the one that symbolizes the camp on their literature. It's called the Broken Tracks Memorial. And of course, again, it represents the deportation tracks from Westerbork through to mostly, I guess, I said Sobibor and Auschwitz. And as I was standing there, an interesting thing happened to me. I'm standing there photographing, setting up a tripod in those days for the picture. And a man started to walk down these particular tracks towards me. And I was able to snap a few pictures. And this was the one I actually liked the best. And I've also looked at this picture, obviously, many, many times. He looks like a European. The reason I assume he's a European is because of the scarf around his neck. We don't see too many Americans wearing scarves like that. But anyway, I always wondered, and I still wonder, what is this man thinking as he walks down these particular tracks? It was very, very interesting moment for me. The other memorial at the camp are the stone memorials. Here they have 102,000 stones, each stone representing one person who left Westerbork for the camps, again, mostly the extermination camps. Out of the 102,000 people, only 5,000 people survived. Only 5,000 people survived. And of course, when I was younger, I always thought the Dutch was so good to the Jews, you know, and Holland was good. But we know now, of course, Holland was not good to the Jews. There were good people in Holland like there were good people everywhere else. But Holland was not very good to the Jews at all. And almost the entire Jewish population of Holland was exterminated. So what's really poignant and emotional about this particular memorial are the pictures, because as we know, vast numbers especially, are hard to conceive. But one picture of one child, a woman, a family is very, very, very emotional. And it always is to me every time I look at it as well. So this memorial I'm showing you because it's not in the book. I just happened to be in Rio this past year. I have cousins in Rio that I visit every once in a while. I've been watching this memorial being designed and built over the last 5 years. And finally, it was opened the week before I arrived there this past year, last January. And it's a short drive from Copacabana Beach, as you can see here, 20-minute drive, 30-minute drive. This picture is not one that I took. This is from the advertisement, but you can see the beautiful setting of this particular memorial in Yitzhak Rabin Park. This is, of course, one of my photographs right here. And what this was built by a man by the name of Andre Orioli. It is a 20-meter high column divided into 10 sections, each section about 6 feet high, 2 meters, representing the 10 commandments. And as we get close, we can see the bottom one is cut open. And on there in Portuguese, it says, "Thou shalt not kill." And of course, we know the significance of that statement at this particular memorial, because in fact, the Nazis murdered 6 million Jews among countless others as well. So interestingly here also, the Brazilian flag always flies at half-mast. And as I was photographing the flag at half-mast, of course, I noticed in the distance the Christ figure on the mountain, very famous statue and tourist attraction in Rio de Janeiro. So I took this picture and I posted it on Facebook. And a friend of mine, who actually is not even Jewish, called me up and said, "Oh my God, did you notice on that picture of Christ, smoke is coming out of his head?" And then of course I looked at it and I said, "Wow, it does look like smoke's coming out of his head." Obviously it's a cloud, but you know, I always wonder, is it really coincidence or is there a reason for that to have happened? I'd like to think there was a reason for that to have happened. So people ask me, what do I think the most significant memorial in the United States is? There are many memorials in the United States. I have photographed in 24 different cities. But to me, the most significant one is the Holocaust Memorial of Miami Beach, not because I live in Florida, but because of the significance, the largeness of the memorial. And I'll show you, if you haven't seen it, you should go see it. It's easy to see if you're in Miami Beach. These pictures, of course, are from Google Earth. You can see it represents a arm coming out of the middle of a pond, and it is located right near Lincoln Road and the convention center. Very easy to see. You can park your car right there. It doesn't cost any money. And this is what it looks like. This was designed by an architect by the name of Kenneth Treister. Interestingly, also, the piece of land that this particular memorial is located on is, the address is 1933 to 1945 Meridian Avenue. Now, the people say this is not designed. This was the piece of land that they received, and that was the address. And they felt, of course, it was a Beschert address because that was the year of Nazi occupation of Europe, 1933 to 1945. This took 4 years to build this significant memorial. It was dedicated in 1990. You can see the arm, and on the arm, we can see figures going up the arm. There are over 100 life-size sculptures of emaciated people trying to crawl up this particular arm. And we can see around the statue, there are people as well, couples, singles, children. He calls this particular sculpture Love and Anguish. And you can see why it's called Love and Anguish. This is a nice photograph I took at night. It's lit up very nice, very nicely. And around the memorial are various chambers where you can read various things about the Holocaust. There is a wall that people have given names of their relatives and or friends that perished in the Holocaust. So a very significant memorial. People find it very disturbing sometimes, and it's like the artist said, it's supposed to be disturbing. It's not supposed to be pretty. It's supposed to be gross and grotesque because the Holocaust was grotesque. So I'm showing you the Ohio Holocaust Memorial because it's one of two memorials that are on state capitol grounds. The other one is in Des Moines, Iowa. I have that one in the book as well. This is a very nice memorial right on the capitol grounds in Columbus, Ohio. It was designed and built by a man by the name of Daniel Libeskind. If the name rings a bell, it's because he also helped design the World Trade Center Memorial and has designed memorials in Amsterdam, Ottawa. He designed the Berlin Jewish Holocaust Museum and the Copenhagen Holocaust Museum. A very famous Jewish architect. He was born in Poland, of Holocaust survivors himself. So of course we can see the broken Jewish star, a symbol we see oft times in Holocaust memorials. We can see a lot of words written on this particular memorial, and these words are an interview of a man by the name of Michael Schwartz. He gave this interview in 1976. He described his first 2 days at Auschwitz concentration camp in marked detail, and the whole interview is placed on this particular monument. And here it is from the opposite side. You can see the dome of the Ohio State Capitol. The Ziegelman Holocaust Center is in Detroit, Michigan. I'm showing you this. I don't usually show Holocaust museums, but this is one of a few museums where the museum itself is a Holocaust memorial. And as you can see, it's located in the northern suburb of Detroit, in Farmington. It's about 30 miles. I actually lived in Detroit for 4 years, so I know the area very well. This is the museum. It looks like pretty much any museum on this particular picture. But if we look around the museum, we can see the motif is of a concentration camp. So there are two other museums like this that I have in the book. One is the Chicago one in Skokie. It's a relatively new museum, and it is also designed as a concentration camp. And the one in Tucson, Arizona, is also designed as a in Houston, Texas, designed as a concentration camp. The Tucson one is the JCC has a memorial in its facade, and they're all in the book as well. So if we look around this particular museum, we can see, again, various aspects that look like a concentration camp. Interestingly, the Detroit Holocaust Museum was the first freestanding Holocaust museum in the United States. It was built in 1986, but this was moved in 2003 to this location and rebuilt. And we can see here this large structure representing a large chimney. And of course, at the entrance to the museum, we see the railroad tracks. The Wall Street Journal, at the time when this museum was open, had a headline that said, "Should a Holocaust museum look like the subject it is portraying?" And it was somewhat controversial, especially in the neighborhood. Some people found it, quite disturbing to have a structure like this in their neighborhood, but other people found it very, very, very good to have it there. By the way, so this museum, 2003, was built here. It was just closed for renovation and just reopened about a month ago. It was reopened as a Holocaust museum with all new technology. So I haven't been there at the new place yet, so it should be very interesting to see if you're in Detroit. I just want to switch quickly to the West Coast to show you the Los Angeles Holocaust Monument. It's also very easy to see. Very few people, I think, have been there, but it's right near the farmers market, as you can see. A 2-minute drive by car. You could even walk from the farmers market in LA. When I first saw it in 1992, this was built, I believe, in 1992. Yeah, it was built in 1992, and I was there shortly after it opened. It looked like this, and I thought it was really a good-looking memorial. But since then, they've added structures to it. They've added the Holocaust Museum and a children's memorial as well. So you see a lot more if you go there. But I actually liked it better the way it was freestanding, with these particular structures. We can see here 6 columns reaching to the sky, and on each column is material relating to the Holocaust. This shows you some of the material. This is legalization of racism. That's my wife in the distance. I had to include her here because she would have been mad at me if I didn't include at least one picture of her in the book, I think. But anyway, so if we look at the floor, we can see these are the extermination camps: Belzec, Sobibor, Treblinka, Kelmo, Auschwitz, and they added a 6th one, Majdanek, which was really not an extermination camp, but so many people were exterminated there during Operation Reinhardt, the operation to exterminate the Jewish population of Poland. And you can see there are 6 columns around, of course, representing the 6 million. The one in the middle is empty, and that represents the column for the living people. I'll show you this in New Orleans because it's kind of an uplifting memorial. And actually, my wife said, you have to show something a little more uplifting than all this depressing stuff. So this memorial is right down the block from Canal Street. It's in Waldenberg Park, right on the riverfront, and very easy to get there if you have children or grandchildren at Tulane University. I include this map so you can get from there to see it. It's only 15 minutes from Tulane, but right near downtown and Bourbon Street. So this is what it looks like from the outside. It's the New Orleans Holocaust Memorial. And you can see the motif here. This is the design by Yaakov Agam, the famous artist who does these construction and reconstruction arts. As you walk around structure, his arts, you know, look from side to side, you see different items. And so when you walk around this particular memorial, you can see a Jewish star that's broken up, representing the destruction or the attempted destruction of the Jewish people. And you get to a certain point right here, you can see the reconstruction of the Jewish people after the war and with the birth of Israel. And on the other side is a menorah with a similar motif. A very nice memorial, very easy to see, very near Canal Street. I will finish tonight's presentation with the Liberation Monument. It's in Liberty Park, New Jersey. I don't finish it because we're in New Jersey, but I finish it wherever I speak, because to me, this is one of the most profound memorials, I think, in the United States. As you can see, it is very close to downtown New York. This Google Maps says it takes 18 minutes to get there from the Holland Tunnel. Of course, that's about 4 o'clock in the morning with no traffic. At other times of the day, maybe it could take you, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours, who knows. But anyway, it is actually very easy to get to. It's located very near, across from the Statue of Liberty and across from downtown New York. And I like this picture. This picture I placed on the cover of my book. And what it represents is one of the soldiers at liberating Dachau and carrying a prisoner, of course, in his arms. I didn't mention it, but in the introduction, it was mentioned about Dachau. So Dachau, of course, was liberated by General Dwight D. Eisenhower's 7th Army. It was liberated on April 29th, 1945. And it was a very, very profound experience for almost all the GIs that liberated that particular camp. I dare say hardly any of them were ever the same again after liberating Dachau. And this particular soldier is carrying the prisoner, and you can see the Auschwitz number on the prisoner's arm. And so when it was dedicated, Governor Keane was your governor at the time. And he says, and I will quote him, "The monument says that we as a collective people stand for freedom. We as Americans are not oppressors, and we as Americans do not engage in armed conflict for the purpose of conquest. Our role in the world is to preserve the precious thing that we consider to be a democracy. Today, we remember those who gave their lives for freedom." And I think we need to keep remembering that. And unfortunately, 3 Americans, as we know, were killed just yesterday, giving their life for freedom. And every day now, unfortunately, our Israeli brothers and sisters are giving their lives for freedom as well. This picture I'll end with, because I really, this is not a Photoshop picture. This was just a different angle of the statue, with the Statue of Liberty in the background, utilizing a telephoto lens. Because what makes me say is that every time America turns its back on oppressed people, bad things tend to happen. So America has to stand for freedom. We have to, unfortunately, protect other parts of the world, because if we don't, it seems like nobody else will. And I want you to thank you for allowing me to share my road to remembrance with you tonight. Remember George Santayana's famous words: "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Here's my book. Here's a commercial plug. It's found on Amazon or Barnes & Noble website. And if you can take a look at it, I'd appreciate it. Table of contents, there's 100 memorials in there, various parts of the country. There's a lot of information. And thank you for allowing me to join you tonight.
So there are a couple of questions already in the question and answer section. So one of the first people is asking, about your photography, and what is it that made you decide to become a photographer? When did you start, and why did you do most of your book in black and white?
Yes, good questions. So, well, I've been photographing since I was a child. I lived in a 3-room apartment in the Bronx for many years and used to take my mother's bathroom and convert it to a dark room. So I've always had this interest. But then, as we said, we had to make a living, and I was lucky enough to become a physician. I became a radiologist, which also kind of takes pictures as well, but really, I don't think that had anything to do with it. But when I retired from practice, I went to photography school for about 3 months in Missoula, Montana. And I came back, and since I was so active in the Jewish community, I decided to take pictures of Jewish-related items. And I've done a lot of projects with survivors and of minions and things like that. So that was my photography story, I guess. As far as black and white, to me, it's a black and white subject. It's not a very colorful subject. The Holocaust is to me more black and white. As remember, even Schindler's List was filmed pretty much in black and white. So it's a black and white subject in my estimation, my artistic estimation, anyway. So I like to add a splash of color, which I do in a lot of these pictures, but in the book, it's all black and white. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. They're asking, do you have a personal connection to the war or to the Holocaust?
I have the only connection, yes, I have just a little bit of a connection. Thank God we don't know that we lost any people. My family emigrated to America after the turn of the century, mostly from the Soviet Union, but what was Russia at the time, and Belarus. But like I said, my late wife her parents escaped Germany with a lot of her family, but some of her family did not escape. And then I was with a woman for about 7 years after my wife passed away, whose parents were both survivors and met in a DP camp in Germany after the war. And as a matter of fact, her mother worked in a factory during the Holocaust where they made thread, and she was filmed in a documentary because this lady made a documentary called "Saved by a Thread," which I thought was an interesting title because these women were making threads, and that's why essentially they survived the Holocaust. Yeah, so that's my connection essentially. But my real deep connection came from my original trip to Dachau and Mauthausen. Yeah, that pretty cement. After I left Dachau, I somehow felt a yearning to go to all the concentration camps. I've been to 14 camps. I have 14 camps in the book. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they're asking, what is something that people should take from or find a lesson from your travels and from your book?
Yeah, I think the lesson to me of the Holocaust is number one, we can never remain silent, with all atrocities. We always say never again, never again. I've heard it so many times, but we've watched, to be honest, we have to be honest sometimes with ourselves. We've watched atrocities sometimes in other places. If it doesn't really involve us, we may be quiet, but we really can never be complacent and quiet when bad things are starting to happen to other people, because first it'll happen to other people and then it'll happen to us, is the famous statement. First they came for the socialists, they came for that whole thing, and eventually there's nobody left to protect you. So I think that's a good lesson that we all need to know. But the other lesson I did learn, and I talk about it from my visit to Treblinka and meeting people overseas and all that, is that there are good people in this world, and we have to connect with these good people. And there are a lot of Christians in the United States. The evangelicals, for example, it's all political stuff now. So I hate to even bring up all this stuff about but evangelicals very supportive of Israel. There's more evangelicals that come to Israel than Jews. I mean, it's like, so I mean, we have to cultivate our friends, and we do have a lot of friends. And we need friends, because we could see at a time like this, friends are very important. And the other thing is we can never let a government come in that, you know, will destroy us. That's for sure.
So there are so many lessons to learn that the memorials are such a wonderful way to bring up these conversations with people. Have you had the chance to talk to any high school students, or do you speak mostly to adults about your experiences?
You know, it's interesting. No, I haven't spoken to high school students. I've had a friend of mine that wants to do a project with students. I think you're right. Students would be a good subject, you know, a good group to speak to. But I have not personally, no. But a friend of mine has suggested exactly what you said, that we need to go out and speak to students, maybe make a YouTube and something. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we actually have recorded this evening's presentation, and there was a question in the Q&A. People who are registered for this program will receive a copy of that recording. So I don't see any other questions in the Q&A box right now. So I think I would like to thank everyone for joining us and turn it over to Mike Bass.
Well, thank you, Dr. Katz, for being with us tonight. Your dedication to locating and photographing the memorials of our past is admirable. My wife and I seem to have something in common with you. As we travel the world, we also try to locate such memorials and have found that while some are clearly noted on city maps, others seem to be hidden from plain sight and can only be located using a Jewish guide. On behalf of the Rob Goodwin Center, thanks to all who have attended tonight on this 2024 UN Holocaust Remembrance Day commemoration. I would like to close this event with a very poignant quote from Albert Einstein. "The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing." Thanks again to everyone. Please have a good rest of your evening, and thank you again, Dr. Katz.
Thank you, and thank you, Michael, and
Thank you for joining us, everyone.